A knock came softly on the door as Augusta appeared. "Dinner will be at 8. Make sure you're presentable." Severus felt her keen eyes appraise the state of his hair, and he resolved to groom it thoroughly. Until the other opportunity presented themselves, he needed to stay in her good graces. "Neville will be here during dinner with us, and he's brought his little lady friend," she added. "And Severus, do behave." Fuck. The boy was back. There went the comfortable bed. If he asked nicely enough, perhaps she'd allow him to temporarily transfigure the rattan in the conservatory into something. But it was a stretch. He was being turned out on his own for the night, like a cat dropped on a stoop. At dinner, the clink of china had replaced the sound of stilted conversation. Soon after, Neville's best girlie, Hannah Abet, inquired how he'd been for the last few years. It was apparent she didn't expect a rather truthful answer to the crass question. The silence lingered until the pudgy Hufflepuff couldn't take it any longer. "I've perfected my Yorkshire pudding. It sells out at the pub every night, Professor. You should really see the recipe. It's as long as some of your potion instructions." Somehow, he genuinely doubted that. "It sounds delicious." Hannah brightened considerably, and more importantly, Augusta looked pleased. The girl proceeded to natter on about her work, and Severus was comforted to know that his hard-won knowledge and expertise in the classroom had not been wasted on a student, as she had become an average barmaid, and thought of herself as something of a bit of an alcohol alchemist. He supposed it was better than the other 90% of the little buggers he taught. It was at a natural lull in conversation, as the main course was being cleared away, that dinner soured. It was the perfect opportunity for someone with manners to say, "My, what a delightful meal! My compliments to the cook." He had been poised to say just that when the boy proudly spoke up. "I killed your snake, Professor." "Snake? What snake?" Dear gods! Truthfully, Severus lost himself for a moment as blood drained away from him. He could see his hand perched on the damask tablecloth, clutching a silver spoon and little ounce, suspended infinitely in time. He couldn't fathom a response, nor articulate it from its parched throat. A phantom cage sat heavily on his shoulders. Trapped. He was trapped. Couldn't run, couldn't escape. Fangs reared up before him. If he'd been a bit prepared, he might have had something poignant to say about it. A parting word for posterity, or a cutting remark for his own snake-like executioner. Something witty, perhaps. The sort of phrase that lived on and endured. If Bugs Bunny could manage "Goodbye, cruel world," it would stand to figure that he could be arsed to say something meaningful. Instead, he'd only thought, "Oh, shit!" before gasping for breath. How disappointing, really. "That's right," Hannah said enthusiastically for a long distance away. "He sliced his head clean off and killed it in one. It was amazing." Severus attempted clearing his throat, an action that only seemed to cause his scar to throb. Unbelievably, he was able to hoarsely whisper a grateful, "Thank you." In a moment, sound and sensation resumed, like an old gramophone suddenly starting up again. Shocking and deafening in a wake of silence from before. He caught a satisfied look from his hostess and knew he'd done well in her eyes, but cared little for it. In the end, it was just as he'd expected. Augusta kindly pushed a basket loaded with meat pies at him, and briskly asked if he had anything that he'd packed. Neville and Hannah happily offered him a farewell, without realizing they were pushing him into the streets. He was homeless, and Severus had lost his stomach to beg. No, he wouldn't beg. He'd been kicked, and kicked, and kicked. Severus was damned if he'd beg, though. He drew up the tattered remains of his self-respect as he tightened his cloak around him, buffeting his narrow shoulders from the bracing wind. They both had traveled too many miles, shared the burden of wizarding trials. It was such a shame. Albus was to blame. They were married in ministry files.